Hi, I'm Kat, and welcome to my channel, where today I'm going to talk about making my first computer game. So why am I doing this? I've always kind of liked the idea of making a computer game, and I've had a few flirtations with it in the past. I'm not a hardcore gamer. I don't play AAA games at all. I prefer sort of more either casual games or narrative games or yeah, VR games now. and Yeah, and that's the kind of game I also want to make as well, you know. So I thought that for a nice, easy entry into making a computer game would be to make a more of a narrative game, an interactive fiction game. So, you know, a choose your own adventure book, but with a bit more logic and complexity added on. Yeah, and I thought that it would be quite nice to do this as a way to try a bunch of other different creative things, like as well as sort of making the game and the sort of coding aspect of that. There'd also be doing some artwork for it, so I could bring in my love of drawing, maybe doing some music, sound effects. Though any music talents I had have withered on the vine over pandemic and lockdown. I don't think I've picked up a ukulele or gone to the piano for a couple of years now, which is a shame, but not relevant to this video. So I'm just gonna give you a bit of a talk through Twine, which is what I'm going to use to make this game. Um, and not tutorial level talk through, just here's where I'm at level talk through. And yeah, I'll see you after that. So why am I using Twine to make my very first video game slash interactive fiction slash narrative game? Um, well, it's a very simple and easy to use solution. It's no code or low code, and the code which the output uses is JavaScript with CSS and HTML, which are all technologies that I'm familiar with. And also the desktop app is available on Linux, which is a big plus for me because I use Ubuntu for my desktop. But yeah, so anyway, so this is not a Twine tutorial. There's plenty of those elsewhere on YouTube that you can find. Some of them are great. I don't know off the top of my head any to recommend right now, unfortunately. But yeah, but I'll just go through how I got started. I went and grabbed the desktop app, which, as you can see, has a nice little Linux flavour, but if you're on Mac or Windows, you've got a flavour for you too. And yeah, this is what Twine looks like. This is the sort of main workspace where you can see all of your projects, all of your stories, and this is the one that I'm working on. So I've already actually gone a fair way down the line on working on this story, and a lot of it, the structuring and planning I actually did in a notebook ahead of time. So it was somewhat not fully designed on paper, but maybe 80% designed on paper before I even went in and started creating the structure in Twine. So yeah, you can add a new story by hitting this, and then let's just pop into the one that I've been doing. So yeah, I think there's about 70 passages there. So if you're not familiar with Twine, each one of these is a sort of a scene, a section, a passage which will appear on the screen, and then you can click on links in each passage to go on to a number of, one of a number of others depending on the decision, and that's shown by this sort of arrow between the post-its, and then if you click the link which goes to this passage, that one vanishes, this one appears, and you're sort of on the next page along the choices that you're going to make. So yeah, I find it a very intuitive user interface, and yeah. So one thing that I'm not fully up to speed with yet is that there are a bunch of different formats. So story format. So I'm using the default one, which is called Harlow,
But yeah, it seems like there are 3 others, and in various versions, each of those 3. But let's just stick with the basics for now. One thing that I really do appreciate is that there is great documentation for this project. I write technical documentation, so I appreciate technical documentation. And yeah, you can find that at twinery.org /cookbook, and that tells you how to do what you need to do. And I've kind of been reading through it front to back, but also dipping in if I've needed any help on it. But actually at the moment I'm only kind of using fairly basic structures in Twine. I'm using links which let the player go from one passage to the next. I'm using variables and setting variables for various different, you know, has the character done this, has the player chosen that, you know, mostly Boolean, true, false. And what's the other thing? Yeah, and I'm using conditionals. So once I've set them, I've got those variables and I've set them, I'm using an if variable is blah to decide whether to allow links between certain passages or whether to display certain text. Which is pretty much, it's the basics, but it's I would say powerful basics. Yeah, so let's just talk about my plan, my game which I'm learning to make here. So it does seem like I've gone a little bit crazy with the number of passages which are in this story. Each of these an individual scene, somewhere between 100 and 300 words each, I'm thinking. So that's going to be a fair amount of words. And believe it or not, this was actually designed to be pretty bloomin' simple. Like there's a fairly small number of characters and, you know, character interactions. There's a very small number of locations, and each, if you just follow one single story thread, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, end. Right, yeah. Each individual story thread is not that long. In fact, if you can see that there's a sort of vague linear structure here. I actually decided to make it a 3-act structure, so each sort of path through it is just a 3-act structure. So sort of Act 1, and there's fewer of these because there's, you know, you haven't diverted into various choices, but also because people are in rooms together. So for each set of characters, there's multiple characters in each scene, whereas perhaps later on they break apart a little bit more. And then this is the second act, and we've got sort of one interstitial one here, and then the third act. And as you can see, there's a whole lot more in the third act because there's more to process there, like going through variables have been getting set, choices are being made. So there's more difference in what could be happening at the end, and then you go to the end. And actually, I designed it so you could loop through it and go through and follow different people and their different threads and storylines and see how changes you've made in one storyline may affect on another. So that's kind of why I've got this structure, and that's one thing which I'm finding really great about this whole sort of sticky notes and string layout, is that you can just move things around and organise things so that the logical structure of the story, of the individual passages, mirrors the story structure, and it's very easy to get a feeling of sort of which is in what's in which act and how it all goes together. And there's some extra ones here, like I did individual character descriptions that the player can click into if they want to get a bit of an idea of what the characters look like, and a bit of characterization as well. And then at the bottom I've got a whole load of flashbacks here, which is another thing which people can go to get out of the main story flow and get a bit more context, if they're interested in a bit more depth. But the flashbacks are entirely optional. You can get the gist and understand what's happening in the story without going into those. So That's pretty good. Well, I'm saying it's pretty good. I don't know if it's pretty good yet because while it looks like I'm really ahead on this, um, this is just the structure. None of the well, very few of these passages are actually written. The actual text of what is going to happen in them. In most of these, there's just a notes of this happens, this happens, this happens, and these are the choices with the links. Because I felt like that for my process, it was very more important to get the structure down of where things could go and then write how they get there later. And that's sort of what I was going to go for with this. But if that's not how you work, if you're more of a pantser than a plotter, as they say, then yeah, you could write a passage fully and completely and then give the character options and then follow that thread and follow a thread and follow a thread and then backtrack and follow a thread and follow a thread and follow a thread. So you could write threads of your story as you almost discover them yourself, and I think that would be a cool and interesting thing to do. But for my first attempt at making a game, I really just wanted to strongly plan what I was going to do and achieve it.
Cool. So that's my progress on the game front so far, and I will keep you posted in future videos when we get onto different stages of that, like artwork creation and stuff. And I'm hoping this will sort of be a bit of an on-ramp for me to trying this stuff out, getting some skills, maybe making some basic games, maybe even making a game to sell on the Play Store at some point. We shall see. Um, Twine sort of, you know, it does one thing and it does it very competently, but I think I want to go more into learning code based game making and to sort of freshen up my code skills. Literally, all I touch late nowadays is Python, and only in a very scripty fashion. So it'd be nice to get my code skills back up. And to that end, I've also got Unity downloaded, and I'm gonna well, I've been working through some of the tutorials, but I think that the next stage on the game development learning track for me would be to learn Unity as well. Even though I'm using Twine for this interactive fiction, I'm really kind of keen to try out Ink, which is an open source language format, a bit like Markdown from Inkle Studios, whose games I love, or at least those games which are available on Android. I haven't played their Switch only one. Yeah, so at some point I might move into using that to make similar sorts of games, because that also has an integration with Unity, so there's a chance there to both do a format I'm comfortable with and use it as an on-ramp into learning the next technology I want to learn. We shall see. I mean, at the moment, the graph of possibilities for where I can go in this learning really does look like a Twine map of choose your own adventure in learning game development, which I'm a little excited about. Though, you know, it's still summer, it's entirely likely that the lure of wandering around the fields and painting things is going to get me away from the desk more often than I'm going to be sat here hiding from the sun and plugging away on the computer. So, you know, speed of progress, less important to me than enjoyment of progress at this point. Anyway, I've rambled at you enough. Yeah, I'll see you next time, and I hope you have a smashing day.